Hello and welcome to another Cod-Past. For those of you unfamiliar with these videos, they're predominantly audio only, so if you've got something better to do, please feel free to click away and let your mind be occupied. However, if you're sitting around doing nothing and just want to decompress, enjoy some random video game in the background. The format of these videos is that I'm going to be discussing some of your comments, followed by some thoughts on my most recent videos, and a discussion about what I intend to do in the future. The comments themselves are in no particular order. In fact, I tried to arrange them by the related video in which they appeared, but for the most part I don't think that there will be a strong connection between all of them. So without further ado, let's get into it. Our first comment comes from Matt on the Behemoth video, saying that if we think about it, the behemoth could be a metaphor for the earth, saying that the minerals and the sunshine and whatnot that's all mentioned in the behemoth video actually is a rather apt description of the earth itself. And I actually quite like this, although there are some problems with the myth as it connects to this, because ultimately we are going to only begin consuming the behemoth after the end of the world. Meanwhile, we are kind of consuming the earth now, not necessarily in a negative way, but of course this becomes a bit of a confusing topic because we can go into environmentalism quite easily from here, but I agree and disagree. I do like it as a metaphor though, and I really appreciate the idea, so thank you, Matt. Next we have Sun Color Games saying that the video gave him absolutely no information and he wants to know more in detail what the behemoth did. Well, not very much actually. It just walked around and ate things. The problem with the trinity of epic beasts in the biblical collection, however you want to go about it, because it is mentioned outside of the Bible, that's why I say biblical collection, is that apart from the Leviathan, there's not a lot of information on these creatures. Ziz has proven a bit of a difficult creature for me to do a video on, and it is something that many people have asked me to do a video on, but it's been incredibly delayed because I don't know if there's enough information yet for me to make a full video. So make of that what you will. But if you really want it summed up, it walked around and ate things, and one day we're going to eat it. So yeah, I guess we could compare it to like a Terry Pratchett sort of world elephant kind of thing. The world elephant idea came from somewhere else, but the first thing that came to mind was Terry Pratchett, so there you go. Next, for the Leviathan video, we have Spacer asking whether I'm defining the Leviathan as any sea creature, and also asking about which continent, which part of Africa the huge, African Leviathan creature, the African sauropod creature, came from. In this case, yes, I was defining Leviathan as basically any massive sea creature. The reason for this was because the Leviathan itself is very poorly described in the Bible. Moreover, and the Talmud actually, moreover, the word Leviathan has been used for so many things beyond that basic creature that I couldn't actually pin down the precise definition. So that's why you see me defining things like Godzilla as a Leviathan. For anybody paying careful attention, you'll have noticed that I was speaking in a very Lovecraftian tone when referring to the Leviathan, which is why I included Cthulhu. This was actually quite fun, and one of the later commenters mentions it. So please, if you're curious, give that a listen, and I hope you can pick it up. I know that my vocabulary is less judicial than what other people would like, but yeah, it is different, trust me. As for the creature in Africa, this is actually a bit of a problem. I should have been more specific when I spoke about it. To be honest, a lot of the problems with African myths is that, they were mostly oral, and they spread around quite a lot. So it's difficult to pinpoint exact locations of where one creature might have come from compared to another. And although the creature in question, whose name suddenly escapes me even though I had it written down here somewhere, was, even though the creature was predominantly in the Congo area, I have heard stories of it going all the way down to Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, near Victoria Falls, they even have stories of mermaids and the like, so it's really difficult to point down where it comes from. But I'm certain that it's mostly around the Congo area, since a lot of expeditions were launched in that area to look for the creature. So yes, you are correct, ma'am or sir. I will be a bit more specific in future. Next we have demonic myth. Sorry, not demonic myth, demonic mist, saying that the Kraken and Leviathan aren't the same, and they're both around as old as each other, and the Kraken existed before Catholicism came to Greece. And again, yes, this is correct. The Kraken is a particular creature on its own, but in this case I classified it as a type of Leviathan for the sake of expedience. I will probably do a more specific video on the Kraken at some other point, but for now I was hoping to include it there. Interestingly enough, the Kraken is often depicted as an octopus, whereas the Leviathan is a large fish. However, in more modern times these things have become a bit, well, blurred, as I've mentioned before, so make of that what you will. The image that I've used as a icon for the Leviathan video is in fact one of a Kraken. That's what I originally found as a stencil to use, so that's why it has tentacles. Next we have Tim Caffrey, who, if I can put my voice on, I know what this Leviathan is, and where it rarely dwells, the depths within which it resides. I'll give you a clue. You are the abyss. Interesting food for thought. That was a terrible voice. Next we have Deathproof, saying that we have to understand that the Leviathan lives under the ice in Antarctica, and it will soon be unleashed on humanity. It can blow fire so hot that it can melt mountains and turn deserts into glass. It's really, really massive and really, really long. A very interesting image. I was not aware of the Leviathan being depicted in this way in, well, any kind of fiction, so that's quite interesting. If you'd be so kind as to share where you heard this, I would love to continue to plumb the depths of the creature to be a bit more punny. I must confess as well that I quite like how you've been rather poetic here, turn entire deserts into glass. Whew, that's a very interesting image. Next we have Lucas Lovegrove, saying that he loves how the first few pictures are of Cthulhu. As I mentioned before, I tried to do this in a Lovecraftian tone of voice, so again, if you want to, go watch the video again and see if you can pick up on it. After that we have Charlotte White, who says Leviathan is in the sky, and that Leviathan is the devil, and that it's in the Bible. And this is something that I mentioned in the video itself, that Leviathan is often a synonym for Satan itself. I'm not, even now after doing the video, I'm not entirely sure at what point Leviathan became associated with Satan. As we know, this is a Jewish creature, just a massive fish. And indeed, because of the connection in Christianity, it is then subsequently a Christian creature. But I'm not particularly certain how it went from being this benign creation to actual evil like that. So, a very interesting point. Although, for the purposes of this video, I'm not covering devils or demons. That is something that I have been planning for a while now, but have just not gotten around to writing a script for it. That is to say, devils and demons. So I will be mentioning that at a later point. Do look forward to it. After that, we have comments on the Centaur video from Christophorus. And he says thank you for... he says thank you to me for making the video, but apparently I have missed a few points. He points out Chiron, who was a Greek centaur that was quite peaceful and was not in any way violent and was gentle and wise, etc., and indeed a vegetarian. And yes, I did mention Chiron in the video. However, I do take issue with that for one thing, in that Chiron was the exception to the rule. You see, the idea of the centaur is that it is man overcoming, or rather not overcoming, man as a wild, savage, but not completely bestial creature. So the centaur, embodying this representation, would then take on primitive tools and have primitive culture and be dangerous and frightening but still interesting to human beings without actually having what we would essentially call civilization. And again, obviously we like to depict often in our fantasies a lot of these creatures interacting with us as though they've got more to their cultures and more to their characters than what they generally had in our fictions, but I was mostly addressing the traditional conception of the centaur when creating this video. But again, yes, you are correct, not all centaurs were these savage creatures. I guess in the same way that not all barbarians were, well, barbaric. So make of that what you will. But yes, Chiron was wise and full of medicine information and stuff. I don't know, like, I guess centaurs, despite having dual anatomies, are very familiar with what makes a human being well and ill. After that, I have quite a lot of messages from Alexander Afexendo. I'm sorry, pronouncing your name is a little bit difficult. Afexendo. I don't even know where to begin with replying to these, but I will say that your ideas about the basilisk and vampire are very, very, very interesting. He goes on to discuss how the vampire might drink blood and how it generally interacts with magic and, you know, what have you. If you can pause whatever it is you're doing in the background, please take a look at the messages on screen right now. Some of you may not be all that entertained by it, but it's fun food for thought. He has clearly given this a lot of thinking. After that, going fully onto vampires, we have a New Blood YouTuber saying that vampires are very interesting and that they are trying to research about them. They mention that they would very much like to see a real vampire but fear that they are a myth. From what I have researched, it would appear that this is in fact correct. I went over a lot of the details as to why I believe this is the case in the video, and I should mention that, again, as a general rule, I approach these videos as though they are, well, about mythical creatures, that is to say, things that are not in any way real. So do keep that in mind when trying to research these things. My videos are technically not a source of information about how the things actually exist. When I use reality, I say how they might exist, particularly in the reification portion. However, again, part of this is acceding to the point that there are ways in which the myths could become mirrored in the real world, if that makes sense. But it will not actually be precisely what we have depicted in fiction. So, I'm sorry to disappoint you even further. Next we have Bob Jim going onto the basilisk video, saying that he suggests that maybe the eyes of the basilisk are super reflective, and that he knows that reptiles have a second eyelid, and that maybe basilisk eyes and the secondary eyelid is ultra reflective, meaning that, of course, it would then be able to burn grasses and set fire to things around it, resulting in the death stare that the basilisk supposedly has. Wow, that was a lot of S's. My tongue tripped over itself. Interesting idea, because a pair of really reflective eyelids would be kind of useful, I guess, for dazzling your enemy, but they would also need to focus the light. Now, the problem with eyes is that usually they are convex and not concave, and if we intend to focus light, we need some kind of concave device, such as a magnifying glass or a bit of well, any kind of glass, really. And for that reason, it's a little bit difficult to imagine how this could occur, but I suppose we could construct some kind of ligature or musculature around the eyes that would allow it to become concave after a point. Also, you must understand that the focal length of this light would probably be fixed, or it would be a very limited range, I imagine. And moreover, the basilisk would have to stare at you for quite a while before anything bad happened. So, make of that what you will, I guess. Think about when you were a tiny child burning ants with a magnifying glass. It wasn't instantly that the ants caught a light. In fact, it took quite a while. You would, or maybe not with ants, but probably a leaf, I would say. You could burn directly through, like, sections of a leaf, straight through the middle, etc., but you couldn't actually set the entire thing on fire that quickly. Now, this is a useful survival thing if you have proper tinder and, you know, everything that you need, but it does take a little bit more time than what you might think. And with you running around and trying to move away from the snake, and the snake, I assume, not being able to see you as the eyelids are closed, it's not much of a danger. So, again, interesting idea, but Oh, well, no, actually, now that I think about it, pit vipers have the pits. It doesn't necessarily have to be the creature's eyes. It could be a separate organ. Okay, that's a bit more worth exploring. But for now, I would say that it's not very lethal. So do consider that. Even with the ultra reflectiveness, of course, we don't know to what degree this is reflective. So I'll leave it at that. After that, we have Jennifer Lai talking about unicorns, saying that she is crying right now and that she wishes that they were still alive, and asking whether they are still alive. Well, as I mentioned in the video, the rhinos upon which the unicorn is based are not alive anymore. The Carcharodon are extinct. However, rhinos do exist, so again, as I've fallen to saying this entire time, make of that what you will. But it's still very interesting. I would probably recommend going to a few websites and looking up what people have to say on the Carcharodon, because that would probably explain a little bit more than what my video does as to why the things are extinct, because I didn't actually explore the Carcharodon itself in a lot of detail. But yeah, technically, for all intents and purposes, the unicorn is still alive through the rhino, the modern African rhino, so do enjoy. After that, another... Oh dear, I seem to have put these things out of order. Oh well, whatever. Another comment on the basilisk from Alexandra Axendo. Again, I'm not going to try and pronounce your name. He suggests that the basilisk can shapeshift, something that I missed earlier. A very interesting idea, particularly with the biblical connection that you make over here. But I will say that the basilisk itself, I don't think is often associated with the devil. It's just considered a rather dangerous creature. But again, it's an interesting thought. If anybody does know, because I would like to try and fill that gap in my knowledge, is the basilisk ever associated with Satan? Because we know, obviously, that the snake is meant to be the Lucifer analog, but I don't know of anything particularly related to the basilisk, so do mention down in the comments, please. Next we have Liliosi Miggy saying that an alicorn is a creature with wings, a horse with wings. So if a unicorn has wings, it becomes an alicorn. If a unicorn has no wings, it is simply that, a unicorn. And after that, if a unicorn has wings but no horn, that is to say a horse with no horn and wings, then it is a Pegasus. So thank you so much for that clarification on the various types of mythical horse. A very interesting point that I probably should have covered. After that we have Beck Tante, who asks if I can make a video of Wukong, the Monkey King. Actually, I quite like that story. I definitely should add that to my list, so thank you for the suggestion. Incidentally, we've now moved over to the Krampus video, where Pokesaurus mentions the American Dad episode. This is actually quite a hilarious clip that I highly recommend everybody take a look at. I say clip because I could only find a clip of the Krampus singing, but I imagine the entire episode is quite funny. So everybody do take a look. I had not seen this. I haven't really watched American Dad at all, so yeah. After that we go to the mermaid video, where Alison Biddocks says that there's a lot of ocean still unexplored, but he doubts that the mermaids would be very pretty if we found them. Simply put, that they probably look a lot more like fish or some kind of Lovecraftian horror. He then chastises the Disney depictions of mermaids that we see these days, in a similar fashion to how we would chastise the depictions of vampires in modern times as being the Anne Rice kind of overly dramatic creatures that have been completely detached from their original idea. He says that they would probably be more similar to the docudrama that I mentioned in my video, depicting the mermaids as being more fish-like. The docudrama in question is called Mermaids: The Body Found. So thank you for that opinion. That's actually very, very interesting. Most people would prefer to have mermaids be beautiful and, I guess, sensual creatures, representing Nerissa or Ariel, whichever name you prefer, from the Little Mermaid fame. So, thank you. After that, a comment on the Mermaid Addendum video, where Priestess Yemma Yansa, the Water Witch, says that Tiamat is the first primordial water goddess. and that Yema, Larisi, Miami, Wata, Oshun are all water goddesses. And yes, this is also correct. Well, partially, I think, because from what I understand, the original... God, the word escapes me. I'm forgetting English today, but the original... Akkadian. Yes, I think it was Akkadian. Well, the original Akkadian stories had Tiamat being the dragon god of chaos, and that one of her children gave birth to water. So I'm not entirely sure if I would interpret Tiamat as a water goddess, but I do see that she's often associated with water, so for that reason I can see the validity of your statement. But again, very, very interesting. I do highly recommend that everybody give a look at the older Syrian and Akkadian myths from a couple of millennia ago. Okay, yeah, you can't easily take a look at it, but it's very interesting, so please do give that a look. In fact, I would say that it's probably essential reading for any kind of cultural study on the Western Hemisphere, because a lot of Western culture is developed in those myths and is brought over to us. And in fact, it inspires a lot of modern-day myths and creatures that we have received from the past, such as the mermaid. So thank you for that comment there, priestess. After that, we have comments on the dragon video. This first one being from Twisted Mentality, saying that apparently I didn't find anything on the Middle Eastern dragon, which was a flightless dragon and had 4 legs. Actually, this was something that I completely neglected to enter into the video, and there is a lot of interesting stuff about this, which is, a bit of a pity. For example, Jesus of Nazareth, the character from the Bible, actually killed a whole cave of these flightless dragons, and I'm quite remiss to actually have not entered those into the video, because that is a rather hilarious story, but very interesting. If I recall, the exact circumstances were that Jesus was going through puberty and was a little bit ornery at the time, and so just murdered this cave full of dragons. But I might be incorrect. I know that he did mess around with people in scriptures that were subsequently cut from the Bible. But yes, a very interesting point there, Twisted Mentality. And yes, for those of you listening, I'm not mispronouncing that name. This guy has written Tisted as in T-I-S-T-E-D mentality. So there you go. Next we have Shah Alam in the dragon video asking if I could please do elves. And I'm going to give you a partially disappointing answer in that I have sort of done elves now in the Fairy Fae video, so I'm not going to cover them in a lot of detail anytime soon. However, I do hope that that video holds you over. Now, why do I say this? Well, because elves and fairies and goblins, etc., as I explain in the video, have been considered, well, not have been considered, have come from the same origins as various pagan gods, and that's why they're often collectively referred to as the fair folk. So, while I will probably do a more specific video on them later, I'm not putting that really high on my priority list, so I do hope the fairy video tides you over until then. After that we have the Draconic Witch, who says that the reason we cannot find dragons or draconic beings is because they don't exist in the physical plane, they only exist in the astral plane. A very interesting point. I wonder then, how did we interact with them in the past? And I say that not as a criticism of your statement, but rather I would like to know a little bit more as to how you've envisioned the mythology of the creature, because that would be very, very interesting. We could probably see them as, I don't know, teleporting from some kind of other dimension into ours, though why they would do that is beyond me, but a very interesting idea. Next we have comments on the werewolf video, a very popular video it's turning out to be, saying that where Shadow TDWG, the Dark Wolf Gamer, says that he lives near a forest that has no wolves, yet when there is a full moon he can hear something howling. I imagine those are dogs, but you never know. It's always fun to entertain interesting ideas like that. Maybe you have a bit of a werewolf infestation and somebody's running into the forest and tying themselves to a tree. I wouldn't recommend going out at night, but if you find anything, do let us know. After that, we have Shadow of the Wolf saying that the video was very well put together. He then goes on to describe the details of his own transformation as a werewolf. A very interesting read. Again, those of you doing something that is pausable, you may want to take a look at this. I will keep it up for a while as well. He then went on to have a discussion with a few people in the comments of the video, and I recommend giving a look at that and maybe giving your opinion if you notice anything there that you want to comment on. After that, Little Yuki Wolf says that they have never seen pages of a cedar that decorated. This is in the werewolf video where the cedar is depicted as being read by, I think, a rabbi. I can't remember who's reading it. And it is very elegantly decorated and very, very beautiful. I actually have never seen that myself either. In fact, before I saw this as a stock video, I was actually quite surprised. I put it in there mostly because it does look pretty, but I didn't have any desire to dig deeper. It was just a sort of, that's pretty nice, and sort of passed it on. But if you're interested, I'll try and see if I can find the creator of that video, and I'll post it up here. That's if I can find it, no promises. After that, Timber 901. First, mankind is its own worst monster, but not its only monster. A very interesting start to his comment, I must say. He then goes on to say that if we think mankind is the only real monster out there, then we have led a sad and boring life, or rather a lack of a life. And he then goes on to compliment my report, but I did not do very much analysis, and I didn't go into a lot of detail as to how science hasn't been able to explain magic. I take issue with that comment simply because magic is inherently unscientific. You must understand that what defines something as scientific is that it is falsifiable. Magic is not falsifiable and therefore cannot be explained by science. This doesn't, to entertain your idea, this doesn't necessarily mean that it is not possible, but it does mean that it is not scientific. This is why religion is not scientific, because you cannot falsify it. That doesn't mean it doesn't have any meaning, and it doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong, but we do need to make a distinction between examining magic with science or discussing magic in a scientific context, so please do bear that in mind. He then also goes and says that I failed to anticipate trans-dimensional possibilities. A very interesting point, but again, for the present time, if we're going to be having a serious discussion about creatures from other dimensions, we would actually need to detail the dimensions a little bit more. I know I'm being harsh on you, especially after I entertained a previous comment about trans-dimensional possibilities, but especially since you mention my critique and analysis, this is not something that I can dive into too deeply without, expanding the focus of what I'm discussing. So I don't want to, not even that I don't want to try and pull too many different things in. That said, obviously the reification portions of the video do tend to go into more fantastical things, but I really need to actually write the rules down for the reification portions of the video, because as it stands, I sort of have a feeling about the rules. I don't actually have a hard line as to what I can and cannot include, and communicating these rules with you guys might help you understand the videos a little bit better. So, although I do not agree with you, I do thank you for sparking the thought that will hopefully improve the channel. Thank you so much there, Timber 901. After that, we have a very long discussion about two gentlemen's transformation into werewolves. Again, if you have the opportunity to pause what you're doing, you may want to take a look at this, but for the most part it is a very, I would say, surface level conversation. I do need to speak to these individuals, for want of a better word, for a little bit more detail. It's quite interesting. Also, my apologies, Evan Edwards, I was not very attentive when you were typing these out, so I wasn't able to respond to you at that time, but I do hope that featuring you over here will encourage the pair of you to speak a little bit more. After that, Phoenix video. Another one of the more popular videos, saying that from another one of the more popular videos. Muhammad Zubair Alam says the Phoenix looks like a Ho-Oh, and Dragner from Pokemon. And yes, it's quite fun how the Pokemon series has taken a lot of our mythical creatures and turned them into, well, the Pokemon that we see. It's a bit of a shame that the older Pokemon have sort of fallen by the wayside. I don't particularly like the design of the new ones, but I haven't really been following the Pokemon series since I was, I don't know, 12. So I can't really comment. Not to say that Pokemon is for little kids, but just I've not followed it. After that, we have Panchi Pangoda saying that, well, just expressing a lot of love for the Phoenix and saying all hail the Phoenix. The Phoenix is the foundation, etc., etc. In a funny way, yes, because of the cultural aspect that the Phoenix represents. So, yeah, rising from the ashes, etc. Quite fun. Next we have Majestic Gothtiel, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, who says that witches are not as evil as were depicted in the video, and in fact that they're quite good. This was actually something that I was concerned about coming across in my video, because witches in modern days are generally considered to be benign, but traditionally not so much. People have had very odd relationships with the witch for as long as, well, witches, the concept of magic has existed. So it's not as clear-cut as saying they're good or evil. But yes, you are correct. I should have put a bit more emphasis on the fact that they are not exclusively bad human beings doing bad and naughty things with magic. And I was really worried that that would not come across, so allow me to make that correction over here. That wasn't meant to focus entirely on the negative aspect of witches. I did try to mention the good side, but ultimately, yeah, it seems I needed to put a bit more attention on that, so thank you for the opportunity to do that. After that, we have Foxhelm and Great Sire Kirby talking about what they would like to see next, specifically Ziz in the Cockatrice. And yes, as I mentioned before, I'm going to get round to Ziz as soon as possible. I need to sort out more information on it. Again, because the Leviathan is far more popular and, you know, the Ziz creature is far less popular, it's just difficult to find stuff about it. But I do want to complete the Trinity, as it were. That would be a nice collection there. I was considering whether I should also use the old style of introduction as well, but I think that I've lost the assets for that, so more's the shame. After that, Great Sire Kirby again, saying that the reason Judaism came to vilify witches, despite the general tolerance of them by other contemporary Mesopotamian cultures, is due to how patriarchal Judaism is, and how women often are the cause of the downfall of men. Then he goes on to mention how Eve tempted Adam, Lot's daughters got him drunk and had sex with him, and Delilah tricked Samson. Ancient Mesopotamian cultures venerated women as mothers and fetishized the feminine, where Abrahamic religions marginalized and stigmatized women, especially when it comes to sex and social equality. The concept of women with power over men, like a witch, would horrify such people. A very, very, very good point. And this, dear sir, is why I really enjoy your comments. Very interesting, very insightful, and I've really got not much else to add, except for the fact that perhaps women are, at least were in ancient times, and to an extent in modern times, considered an element of chaos, vis-a-vis Tiamat, whom I mentioned earlier. I need to do a little bit more research about it, because all that I know is from a few textbooks that have mentioned the things in passing, but I have heard tell of another gentleman here on YouTube who does go into it in a bit more detail, so if I can find that detail, I will definitely share it with you guys. But from what I understand, the idea of women representing chaos is at once terrifying and essential, so I'll get back to you on that. In the meanwhile, however, that was another thing that I was considering, which is specifically the... well, how could I explain it? If I've worked as a teacher for quite a while, and when girls cause problems, when they get into fights and you're trying to solve the thing, you'll get, I don't know, like one different story from each girl, and then you have to sort of figure out the truth. Whereas from boys, when they're fighting or bullying or whatever, there's generally one story with, you know, a few different perspectives, somebody feeling wronged. This is because at least from what I've seen, girls are very socially adept, and boys and men tend to be quite terrified by this. In fact, a large section of what the witch would do was sort of influencing the person's status in society and influencing what they could do within a particular culture. So think of this as like, your old grandmother sort of setting you up with what's-her-face down the road. And I think that some aspect of that did influence the idea of the witch. Moreover, as I mentioned in the video, the typical examples of witches, particularly in the Crucible, shows us how a lot of the accusations of people being witches was social manipulation by women. Now, I don't want to say too much on this because it's simply, it's the idea of people using this accusation that doesn't necessarily have to have any proof to gain leverage over one another does seem to follow the typical patterns of what I've seen with girls bullying each other in schools. So there probably is some truth to that, especially the terror and that kind of power, because social power like that is very, very destructive and, well, just as I said, very powerful. So there is probably quite a lot to it. If any of the ladies watching this maybe have some more information or want to expand upon that, I'm only speaking from my experience of watching these things as they unfold in a school setting. But from what I hear from speaking to female friends and the like, they tend to agree. So I wonder if there's not some kind of connection. Anyway, thank you for sharing that, Saya. After that, we have Great Saya Kobe again, mentioning that magic could be explained by witches and other magic-using creatures as being fourth-dimensional beings. Specifically that it might be possible for a fourth dimension to exist. In this case, I should mention he probably means fifth dimension, as fourth dimension would be time in the traditional sense, and that by interacting with this fourth dimension, they're able to perform feats that we could not. This is also a very interesting point. I think that I probably should have gone with this instead of my quantum entanglement idea, because really magic is so tricky. This video was actually a nightmare to try and figure out. I spent so long working on this magic problem that, well, it's ultimately what delayed the video, that and my exams, so thank you for the idea. In fact, I should probably consult with people such as yourself more often on these videos. Next, there's Justin Thompson saying that if he wanted to reify the traditional witch while keeping close to known science, he would say that the demonic familiars are in fact advanced beings, like aliens, for example, lending their technology to the witches. And I like this idea too. It does start to cheat a little because they were not actually reifying witches as such, but we're discussing aliens. But it is a very good point. So yes, I need to perhaps toss some stuff towards yourself, Justin, and Great Saya Kobe, because clearly you have a lot more better ideas than I do. Because good grief, this was a nightmare doing this video. However, going back to the general idea, I did sort of hint at it with technology, but I didn't really take on the run it to the full extent that it could have been, and I think that this idea is a lot better than the one that I came up with, so thank you for that, Justin. After that, we have a comment on my old WTF History Rothschilds video. This is a very, very, very long comment, as is sometimes common on my videos. Again, perhaps for the last time, I would say if any of you are interested in conspiracy theories, do tab away from whatever you're doing or glance up from washing the dishes and give this a bit of a read. It is quite long and I'm not going to be able to go into the details of it, nor can I break it down in any meaningful way within the time that I've set myself to make this video. So do give it a bit of a read and interpret it for yourself. After that, a comment on my update video saying that it's no problem that I'm doing a whole bunch of uni stuff in my spare time, and they're wondering if I could do a video on the Enfield. I had never heard of this creature before, and I thank you for sharing it with me. I'm going to add it to the list. It's the first time I've heard it requested, so I can't justify bumping it up or anything. Presently, I'm having to juggle between a pair of ideas which I'll share shortly, but thank you for adding it. Okay, and with that, we're finished with the comments. Yay! Thank you all for commenting, and I especially appreciate some of the more well thought out ones. They really add spice to the videos, and I hope that everybody else listening to this enjoyed them as well. As for a post-mortem on the witch video, well, as I was sort of complaining about earlier, figuring out the magic for the witch video was really a tricky thing. Putting several ideas together, as I mentioned before, we can't really explain magic scientifically, and in fact I was kind of hesitant to do magic as the topic at all, because, well, I didn't even know where to begin. But I figured if we could just say that it was like a computer system manipulating energy, the computer being your brain and the energy being electricity, then we could somehow justify it. I noticed that a lot of the typical depictions of magic in modern times shows magic as being some kind of plasma or electricity, so I thought, well, why not just be a lot of energy that's being channeled via some way. Moreover, what gave me inspiration was the Ezo from Mass Effect. Ezo, for those of you unfamiliar, is element 0 in the lore of this video game, and it collects in nodes around your points in your nervous system, which then allows you to manipulate mass in a volume of space. This is kind of unrealistic, as your nervous system can't generate enough energy to manipulate mass to that extent in any meaningful way, and how it's projected beyond your skin is not really clearly explained in the game, but that's sort of where my ideas started, and I moved on from there. Indeed, I don't really explain how energy is conducted in the sense that it is, you know, coming from the star beyond, well, okay, no, what I mean by that is that I didn't explain how energy is conducted from the witch to the target, whatever it is that they're trying to manipulate. So I assumed that I would just explain it via arcing energy or something at some point, but it never came to fruition. The key point here being the quantum entanglement that I eventually settled on. The main problem, as you probably noticed in the video, was trying to explain just the sheer magnitude of energy that would be required to do some of the things that a witch is shown to be doing. And I could only settle on, well, a star as the source. I was thinking originally of doing something like virtual particles, or, you know, well, just really little things that have a lot of energy, but ultimately the star seemed the most practical thing. I was going to mention how this could then create a sort of religion where the witches would want to attune to a particular star, and then certain types of stars, depending on the amount of energy they had or the frequency of light that they were producing, would grant the witch particular powers or not. But, well, not powers, rather I should say access to energy in different quantities or at different rates, at different frequencies, so to speak. And then you would have witches from one star attunement competing with another star attunement, etc., as human beings are wont to do. But that was completely beyond the scope of my video, so I left it out rather. However, I will say that the idea, particularly, and I'm sorry for putting you a little bit to the side, even though your idea was very good, Great Sir Kirby, the idea of aliens was very good. So thank you for sharing that with me, sir. Specifically Justin Thompson, I mean. That was a very clever idea. So yeah, that was the main problem with the witch video, and why okay, it's not the only reason that I took so long, but it did make the scripting of the video a little bit longer than I would have liked. Other things with the video, you'll have noticed probably that I took the history, not the history section. I took the culture and origin section and combined them into a history section. I did this predominantly because I found that trying to fill out both the origin and the culture section, I was kind of repeating a lot of the information, and even in previous videos, repeating a lot of the information that I had already mentioned, and I was struggling to occasionally fill out, like, the culture section, try to find enough cultural references or try to find enough historical references to meet the one-page minimum that I set myself for each section. That is when I'm writing the script. So I thought with the witch, you know, let's change the format, let's combine these two things together and try and make the flow of information a bit more elegant. So although the video is now cut into 3 parts rather than 4, it is still of the same length, but I do feel that the quality has gone up. Do let me know what you think about that if you're so inclined. Additionally, if there's any other changes to the formatting of the video that you would like to see, do also plonk that down in the bottom of this video. And yeah, that's pretty much that. There's not very much to say on the witch video, other than... oh yeah, wait, no, one more thing. Yes, I really want to repeat that I do apologize for not emphasizing enough the idea that witches are not necessarily evil. It's something that I really should have taken more care to go over. I'm discovering a bit of a ratio of repeated information, or at least how to present information in such a way that if I repeat it enough, it becomes sufficiently emphasized in the minds of the viewers, just reading through the comments. Certain aspects that I talk about in a particular fashion or to a particular degree tend to become the focal points of what people talk about, whereas things that I mention offhandedly, as one might expect rightfully, tend to get missed. This is particularly bad, especially when I'm trying to communicate a more delicate sense of what it is that I'm talking about. So I will take care to not let that slip in the future. Not necessarily to offend anyone or anything, that's not really the problem, but the problem is just to make sure that people are on the same wavelength as me, so to speak. And now, that's... I don't know what else to say about the witch, so there we go. As for future projects, everything's getting a little bit more back on track. I'm going to be doing either Ziz or the Griffin next. Due to their similarity, I may have to stagger each video with another video in between, depending on whichever one I do first, if that sentence even makes sense. Basically, I'm going to do either the Ziz or the Griffin, one other video, then whatever remains, be that the Ziz or the Griffin. So that's 3 video steps, simply because Ziz and the Griffin are very similar. So please do look forward to that. We've had a lot of requests for the Griffin, which was surprising. I had not thought about including that in the series until people started to mention it. As for the Cure Hime video that I mentioned before, I had almost finished completely recording it when I got to speak to one of the monks at the temple where, you know, the real story ends of Cure Hime. And he was willing to do an interview regarding the interpretation of Cure Hime and a whole bunch of the art related to it. So I'm trying to arrange things with him that I can actually get this interview done. But an interview requires a lot of equipment. So I'm going to have to purchase a few lights and some additional sound equipment. I mention this because I would like to have it done as well as possible, rather than just plonking a camera in front of the guy and saying talk. These lights in particular would be a light shining on the gentleman and then a light in the background, if any of you are familiar with the typical lighting system for an interview. So yeah, when I can get all of this stuff right, hopefully I will get that video to you guys. But if I feel that it's going on too long, I may just well go ahead with the interview without having too much in the way of lighting for the system that lighting for the setup that I would like to do. So yeah, apologies in advance if that should be the case. I mostly say this because I do want to produce these with as high a quality as possible so that you guys can enjoy them, but I also understand that if I sit on the idea for way too long, then it's just going to fall into everybody's, it's just going to fall into the background of my memory, and then I'm just not going to get round to it. So do look forward to that. And if I don't get it to you within a reasonable amount of time, anybody listening to this, please start to yell at me in the comments and make me feel guilty. Then I'll probably sit down with the guy and just say, bugger it, let's go. I'll try and make some kind of compromise on the lighting, but yeah. Otherwise, wow, it's really been a while. It's incredibly hot here in Japan, and I'm sitting here with my aircon off so it's not picked up by the microphone, and I'm cooking. The final video is going to be a lot shorter than what I've recorded over here because I've had to cut out a lot of my moments of thinking and all sorts of stuff like that. So you can probably imagine that sitting here for the better part of 2 hours has been a very trying process. So I hope you guys in the north enjoy your summer. Japan is really hot, and for all of my fellow southerners, people in the southern hemisphere, enjoy your dry winter. I do so envy you. Having this heat in June is such a queer thought. Anyway, cheerio. See you in the next video, guys.